for David. All right? So now, David has accepted his rule over all Israel. Okay? There are 4 factors that strengthen the choice of David. I mean, you have the elders of Israel come down, and they're ready to, let's put aside, let's put an end to this civil war. We want you to reign over us. Okay? What are the 4 possible reasons? 2 of them are given right here within the text. What's the first one they state? During verse 2.
One thing is that David was the one that really fought the battles and won. Saul was king. David.
Yeah, that's right. David, the armies went out and came in with David. David was Israel's military leader, and they recognized that. And then the second one stated in verse 2.
God has said.
Yeah, God said that you were going to be ruler. So they're thinking, hey, if we make you king, then we're going to be okay with God. You know, this is a good thing to do. What I can't understand is it seemed like everybody knew this. Everybody knew that God had anointed David. Everybody knew that God said David was going to rule, you know, after Saul. Even the Philistines knew it. Okay? Yet they, at the drop of a hat, they would betray David into Saul's hands. Okay? They would just turn their backs on David and not do anything to help him in a lot of instances. And I guess that's because Saul was one of their own. You know, Saul was in power. And they may have been afraid of some kind of reprisals from Saul and his army if they did help David. But here, they give it as a first or second reason.
Well, you also have the example of Saul totally destroying the high priest family.
Mm-hmm.
So that couldn't be far from anybody's mind for disobeying or being treated as being King Saul, even if they knew what the rule was, the prophet was going to keep that.
Yeah, that's right. And Saul didn't just go in and destroy a village or even a town or a city. He destroyed the high priesthood. Everyone except Abiathar. Abiathar was the only one that escaped with the ephod and went to David. Okay? I mean, that's pretty aggressive. I mean, I would be thinking if I were an Israelite, okay, our king's kind of mad. Okay, to be doing something like that. And so there's a good chance that the fear of Saul kept them from turning to David. Okay? 2 other reasons that aren't actually stated in the text as to why these people may have come to David at this time. Well, 3. 1, they haven't got a viable king yet. Okay, there's nobody that's descended from Saul that's going to be able to serve as king. There is one descendant of Saul left. Who is that? Mephibosheth. Okay, and he is lame in his feet. All right, and who?
He can't be king because he was lame in his feet.
I don't know, but
I thought that was interesting that, you know, saying that could be king, but he's just lame in his feet. They'll say, don't have brain.
yeah, I don't know. Okay, but it doesn't look like they were ready to, you know, put all their eggs in that basket, right?
He's quite young.
Okay, so here's Mephibosheth, and whose son is Mephibosheth? Jonathan, right? And that's going to make chapter 9 here a little bit more poignant. But remember what Abner had done just before Joab killed him? Abner had started to deliver Israel into David's hands. Take a look at chapter 3, verses 17 through 19. It says, now Abner had communicated with the elders of Israel, saying, in time past you were seeking for David to be king over you. Now then do it. For the Lord has spoken of David, saying, by the hand of my servant David I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines, and the hand of all their enemies. And Abner also spoke in the hearing of Benjamin. Then Abner also went to speak in the hearing of David and Hebron, all that seemed good to Israel and the whole house of Benjamin. So Abner has already been endorsing David. Abner has already been, you know, bringing Israel psychologically down to David. And then the 4th reason is Israel is able to see David's character after the death of Abner and after the death of Ishbosheth, right? You take a look at chapter 3, verses 36 through 37. David is mourning over Abner. It says, now all the people took note of it, and it pleased them, since whatever the king did pleased all the people. For all the people and all Israel understood that day that it had not been the king's intent to kill Abner, the son of Ner. Okay? And so David, of course, is behaving himself very prudently, very wisely before Israel as well. When he first became king, one of the things, over Judah, he reached out to Jabesh Gilead, and he acknowledged their kindness that they had done to Saul. Jabesh Gilead is up there in Israel. Okay? So David is trying to perhaps mend fences, if you will, with the northern kingdom. Now,
And this kind of goes along with what you're saying, that they were able to see him reign for 7 years in Judah, so they saw how he reigned, and that impressed them.
yeah,
And a lot of the same things you're talking about there, went on while he was reigning.
yeah, exactly. How old was David when he began to reign?
30.
He's 30 years old, okay? Now, I read that and I think, how long was Saul persecuting him? Okay? How old was he when he slew Goliath? How old was he when Samuel went to him and anointed him? Saul said, you can't go out and fight this Philistine because you're but a youth, right? So he's looking at him like, this is a kid. I'm not thinking an 18-year-old kid, right? Maybe what, 12-year-old kid? You're 18, well, I guess 20 in Israel, you're in the army, right? But, here's David, and he's already experienced a tremendous amount by the time he's 30. How long did he reign in Hebron?
7 years and 6 months.
That's right, 7.5 years he reigned in Hebron. And we talked about Hebron was a perfect place for him to establish his reign. It was fed by over 23 different springs. It was very defensible. It was a good place for him to be. It was central to Judah, up towards the north of Judah. I think it's about 24 miles south of Judah, not Judah, but Jerusalem itself. Okay? And so he reigns 33 years over all Israel and Judah in Jerusalem. Yeah, so he reigned for 40 years. The first 3 kings each reigned for 40 years. So that brings us then to the central part of the chapter, verses 6 through 16, where Jerusalem is taken. Okay? And it seems that one of the first things that David did, his first recorded act as king, was to make Jerusalem his capital. Okay? He goes up and he takes Jerusalem. Why might he have done this? Why not just stay in Hebron? Hebron was a pretty good location. He's already been there 7.5 years. I'm sure it's very well fortified by this time. So, what's so special about Jerusalem?
There's prophecy about that.
He asked if there's a prophecy about that. Yeah. I don't think
I
so.
believe where Abraham took Isaac was on Mount Moriah, would be Jerusalem.
Maybe that's what I'm.
You also have, Melchizedek, the king of Salem.
Yeah.
And high priest
Yeah,
of God, he from Jerusalem, that's what Salem is.
that's right.
And there's other, God talked about where my name will be, where the temple will be, and he was going to point that out.
That's right.
There's been prophecy specifically telling David that's where it's going to be, or
He talks about repeatedly the place where I choose to put my name.
Right.
Okay? And so David goes up and takes Jerusalem. But the reasons he may have taken it, number one, it's more centrally located. It's moving him further to the north. And these are the tribes that have just come down and aligned themselves with it. Where is it actually located? What tribes are located in? Benjamin. And Saul is from Benjamin. Okay? So there's a political advantage to him putting or locating his capital there. Also, there's the very real possibility that he is taking Jerusalem. Who lives in Jerusalem? The Jebusites. Why did the Jebusites live in Jerusalem? I thought they were supposed to drive everybody out. They didn't, right? They didn't. They had tried to take Jerusalem. There's a fortification in Jerusalem up on what's called the Millo. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And they just are able to hold up there, okay? And the Israelites could not dislodge them. So David may very well be taking Jerusalem also to fulfill God's command to destroy the Jebusites. They're one of the 7 Canaanite nations that God said they were to destroy or to completely drive out of the land. And Israel had not done that. So David goes up to do that. You can read about that command in Exodus 23, verses 23 through 24, and again in Deuteronomy 7, verses 1 and 2. Okay. And this falls into the idea that David is described as a man after God's own heart. Okay? He is going to now return to fulfilling what God had commanded Israel to do. And he's going to drive out the Jebusites. Later on, in chapter 8, we're going to read about David's conquests and where he's actually securing Israel for Israel. Okay? In 1 Samuel chapter 13 and verse 14, Samuel says to Saul that the Lord is seeking a man after his own heart. In 1 Kings 11 verse 4, he is referred to as a man after God's own heart. His son Solomon did not follow wholly after the Lord as his father David had with his whole heart. And then, of course, in Acts chapter 13 and verse 22, in Paul's sermon there in his first missionary journey, he talks about David as being a man after God's own heart. Twice in this passage, when we look at chapter 5, verses 6 through 16, it says, no, I'm thinking of something else. In verse 6, how did the Jebusites respond to David attacking them?
Shall not the lame and the blind will
Yeah.
face you before you be asked.
They say, you shall not come here, but the blind and the lame will repel you, thinking David cannot come in here. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion. Okay? We have no exact definition what Zion means. The Jebusites may have called it that, but this is the stronghold, the fortification that they're actually living in that dominates Jerusalem this time. And it says that he took the stronghold of Zion, that is the city of David. Now David said on that day, whoever climbs up by way of the water shaft and defeats the Jebusites, the lame and the blind, who are hated by David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. Therefore they say the blind and the lame shall not come in to the house. Okay? So David here is being taunted by the Jebusites. Hey, we'll be able to stand you. All we got to do is man the walls with the lame and the blind. And David was insulted by that. So he takes it, but it's going to be difficult to take. And how is it eventually taken according to what David said? There's a water shaft, okay? Apparently the only way in was through a water shaft that led to the pool of Gihon, or Gihon. Not exactly sure how you pronounce that. And it was about 47 feet long. It wasn't very wide. It was fairly rough hewn. And that's the way in to Zion. That's the way in for fortification. So who took it? Joab. Okay? Joab takes it back. He says, whoever does take it, whoever climbs up by way of the water shaft and defeats the Jebusites, the lame and the blind, he shall be chief and captain. Therefore they say the blind and the lame shall not come into his house. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 6 tells us that it's Joab that leads the attack of the water shaft. Okay? Believe me, with what you know about Joab at this point, do you think he's going to let anybody else go first through that water shaft? There's no way. So he goes up. I'm sure that Abishai probably hot on his heels as they went up, or was there a massive, which one was built by Abner? I think it was a massive that was built by Abner, so Abishai and brothers following him up.
What was that verse again? 1 Corinthians.
1 Corinthians 11:6. Not Corinthians, Chronicles.
I think it's that, yeah.
Yeah, First Chronicles 11:6. My abbreviation is just CR, right? Okay, 11:6. Now David said, whoever attacks the Jebusites first shall be chief and captain. Joab, the son of Uriah, went up first and became chief. All right, so he's the one that leads the attack and is instrumental in overthrowing the Jebusites. This is the first mention of Zion, or the city of David. In verses 7 and 9, it's called the city of David twice, and most likely because he took it. All right. It says here that in verse 9, so David dwelt in a stronghold and called the city of David. Then David built all around from the Millo and inward. Does anybody know what the Millo is? You'll run into it a few times throughout the history.
Supporting terrorists.
Says what?
Supporting terrorists.
Supporting terrorists, okay? The city of Jerusalem was actually built out on a finger of a ridge, almost on top of a ridge. And so to get enough flat space for them to actually build on it, they would build terraces. They would build up the banks, right? And that was called the Millo. And so David built them all the way around the Millo, inward, okay? And over time, they would build more terraces. They would build more of that and build up the city.
I looked at Zion when we were talking about it a minute ago, and it says that it basically, that what you said it was built on, that was what was called Zion.
Right.
So it was, that little piece of land that's a hill,
Right.
was called Zion.
Yeah, that's where the fortification was built.
That's where Jerusalem was built.
Yeah. Well, Jerusalem is the city. Zion is like, what in the Greeks called the Acropolis? Okay, and that's the fortification that a city is actually built around. Okay, and that's what Zion is. Kitty?
Wait, my Bible has a footnote that it's a landfill. Millo.
Millo's a landfill?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they would build up and they would fill it in so they could build on top of it. All right, very good. So you're running into that as a capital M, so they just named what it was. So it goes from the Millo inwards. Okay? In verse 10, it says, so David went on and became great, and the Lord God opposes with him. What we're reading about here through chapter 10 or so is David's ascendancy, where he's just doing great. He can do no wrong, okay? And he's really building up the kingdom. He is really putting down all of Israel's enemies. He's securing his borders. He's establishing his borders. Okay? So he is going to give them stability, political stability. He's going to give them rest from their warfare. Okay? Solomon is going to give them economic prosperity. But David's the one who strengthens him. Okay? He goes on to become great, and then there's another king that decides he's going to help him out. Who's that? Hiram. Hiram, king of Tyre, sends labor and material to build David's house. Why would he do this? Hiram didn't have any special relationship with Jesse or anybody in Israel necessarily. So why would he do this? We're going to read about Hiram in Solomon's day as well, indicating that it might be a familial name or it might be a title for the king in Tyre.
We did make an alliance with the powerful king.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So here you got David, and he's showing himself not only be a warrior, but a pretty astute political leader as well. And, you know, he's having success. He becomes great, verse 10 says. So if I'm a neighbor to that, because where's Tyre? It's directly to the west, right there on the coast. And Tyre is incredibly wealthy. Tyre is a huge trading seaport, Phoenician city. And so, you know, you got this real powerful neighbor. You might want to make good with them real quick. And so that's what he does. And he sends cedars from Lebanon David to build his house. Later, Solomon is going to have cedars come in to build the temple. What is so special about cedar wood? The Bible makes a big deal out of cedar wood. It's very dense, okay? It's hard, it's tough, it's beautiful when it's finished, and has a very aromatic fragrance to it, okay? So it's very, very prized. By the time David and Solomon are receiving cedar wood from Lebanon, it's almost been deforested. It was so prized to build palaces and temples to not only God, but to false gods as well. So he sends those to David. And then here, coming towards the end of the section, verses 13 through 16, what's that about?
More concubines.
Yeah. More concubines and more wives. Okay? It says here in verse 13, and David took more concubines and wives from Jerusalem. Hey, new kid in town, right? We got a wider gene pool here. And so he takes them from Jerusalem. How many wives does he already have?
2 men.
Yeah, he's already got 7. Okay? Because there were 6 listed, and then he wanted Michael back. Okay? So he's already got 7. He takes more. When he had come from Hebron, and more sons and daughters were born to David. Now these are the names of those who were born to him in Jerusalem. Shammah, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elisha, Nepheg, Japhia, Elishama, Eliada, and Eliphalet. Okay? And I don't know how many of those are female and how many of those are male. Okay? It's hard enough to just pronounce the name. But why? Why? I don't think it's possible for a man to really love more than one woman. Yet he's got 7 wives, and now he's got a bunch more. How come?
You got the city named after him.
He's got some kids named after him?
No, the city is named after him.
Yeah.
That's why.
City of David.
Yeah.
You gotta fill it up with his kids.
Like Corey said, political alliances.
What?
Like Corey said, political alliances.
Yeah, political alliances to establish his monarchy. Okay? It's a big deal for kings to have a lot of successors, a lot of kids. And it also shows their power. It shows their influence. It always just kind of surprises me when you have these people that are such heroes of faith, and believe me, David was definitely one of God's heroes of faith. Yet, for the hardness of your heart, God allowed you to give her a certificate of divorce. So his attitudes towards marriage are not the same as what Jesus revealed to us in Matthew 19. Apparently not the same as he established in Genesis, chapter 2 there, chapter 3. But
the weird thing about it is, there's no indication that he's divorcing any of these women. You just got them.
that he what?
I said, there's no indication that he's divorcing any of these women.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, he got a hammer,
Yeah.
right? Some are wives, some are concubines, I don't know. I mean, I guess.
And he's still a man of God.
Yeah.
Even in verse 12, he says he knew that the Lord had established him king over Israel and had exalted him his kingdom for the sake of his people. So I mean,
Yeah.
he knows there's a connection there. He knows that God will. And that's what, and then the very next verses.
Yeah, Lance is pointing out that there in verse 12, it says, so David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel, and that he exalted his kingdom for his people Israel's sake. And David took more concubines and wives from Jerusalem. I guess it's just a thing kings do. It's one of the great mysteries to me. It's like, okay, right? I don't really get it. But this is what David does. And then in the remaining part of the chapter, verses 17 through 25, what does he do? (17 through 25). He defeats the Philistines, right? he defeats the Philistines, and when they had heard that David had become king, they decided to attack him. Verse 19, this is what I was thinking about earlier. Verse 19, and David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I go up against the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hand? The Lord said to David, go up, for I will doubtless deliver the Philistines into your hand. Then after he puts a whooping on them, they come up against him again, in verse 23. And when David inquired of the Lord, he said, you shall not go up. Circle around behind them, and come upon them in front of the mulberry trees. So it shall be when you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the mulberry trees, then you shall advance quickly. Then the Lord will go out before you to strike the camp of the Philistines. So, God, he's still inquiring of the Lord. God's still answering him. God is in no way rejecting him at all. And he says, yeah, you'll doubtless defeat them. But then the next time, no, don't fight against them. Circle around from behind. What's this when you hear the sound of marching in the trees? He says here in verse 23, he says, verse 24, it shall be when you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the mulberry trees, then you shall advance quickly, but then the Lord will go out before you to strike the camp of the Philistines. And the only thing I can think of is, the hosts of God, angels, whatever, they're going to go out and they're going to initiate this. God says, I'm going to go out before you, and then you come in right after. So the idea that God is fighting for Israel, fighting for David. That's all I can get out of that.
So a balsam tree and a mulberry tree are the same thing?
No, I know. Some of the translations will say a balsam tree, some will say a mulberry tree, and when you read the scholarly works on it, they will go into great detail why they aren't balsam trees, or the problem of them being balsam trees. And I'm not entirely sure why it would make any difference whatsoever. Whether they were oak trees, willow trees, balsam trees, mulberry trees, cottonwoods. It's just a detail that's listed.
Well, okay.
So, I mean,
you talk about cedar being so important and all this kind of stuff. So, another tree is nice.
yeah, I should have left the cedars out, huh?
Well.
Okay, well, I certainly do not want to minimize the word of God at all, in any way. But there are some things that God records for us that are more or less incidental to the point that's being made, right? And to find a reason for every little thing, right? Like, you're going to get bogged down real quick. Okay? If there's something here, nobody's discovered it yet, as far as I can tell. Okay? So, it's kind of funny that first people David goes down and defeats the Philistines, because this is who it all started with. The Philistines were attacking Saul, David came up with Goliath, and then he has fought against the Philistines ever since, and now he goes out and he destroys them. All right, anybody got any other observations? Chapter 5?
I have a question.
Okay.
Well, it talks about when he did go into the defeat the Philistines, verse 21, the Philistines abandoned their idols there, and David and his men carried them off. Why would David and his men carry off their idols?
Okay, trophies, right? Remember what the Philistines did when they captured the Ark of the Covenant? They put it in the house of their God, and what have you. She's referencing verse 21. After David had put the Philistines on the run, it said they left their images there, and David and his men carried them away. I don't think to worship them, right? But it was not uncommon at all for ancient armies to carry idols into battle with them, right? Their priests would go into battle with them. Israel would take the Ark of God into battle with them, right? When God told them to, at least. And the priests would go out, okay? And that would secure their victory. And so you have these people, the Philistines, and they're carrying their idols out there. They might be on carts, they might be on catapults, they might be being carried on someone's back, for all I know. They may be standards. but this was their God protecting them and going out to battle with them. Now, what's interesting here is the contrast. The Philistines took their gods into battle with them. Did it do them any good? No. But here, when David said, shall I go up again? Okay. God said, for then, in verse 24, for then the Lord will go out before you to strike the camp of the Philistines. And so that actually happened. So the writer may be alluding to a contrast here. The idols of the Philistines didn't accomplish anything, but God went out to battle for Israel and put them to flight.
So were these idols made out of gold or were they wooden?
They may have been like totem poles that were covered with gold.
If I knew that the only way that the people that we were fighting against were coming against me was if they had this little bitty toy with them, I would take their toy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Come back down after you until they made it under.
Yeah. Like I say, I don't know what Israel did with them. I would imagine they destroyed them. I would imagine they burned them. But it doesn't say anything. It just says they carried them away. Okay.
And the Israelites were guilty of doing the same thing that the Philistines did occasionally. I mean, whenever they took the Ark of the Covenant out in battle with Elon and his son, and didn't do the Israelites any good then.
Exactly.
And, so there was an unauthorized taking of the Ark of the Covenant. And he said, the Israelites, when God told them to take the Ark of the Covenant with them, and then obviously they were victorious. But the Israelites long fought against the idea that, not fought against, held to the idea that if only the Ark of the Covenant was with them, then God was with them and nobody could attack them or they would never lose. And there's history, the Old Testament is replete with examples after examples where God wasn't with them because they weren't living right. Whether the Ark of the Covenant was with them in battle or the Ark of the Covenant was in the city of Jerusalem, it didn't matter. If God was with them, then they would be okay, but if he wasn't, they weren't.
Right.
Regardless of where the Ark of the Covenant was in.
Yeah. Israel's problem is they were treating the Ark like a magic talisman, right? This is our lucky rabbit's foot. You know, if we take this out here, we're going to be victorious. But God's not contained to a box, right? So you take the box out, and then that's when I'm going with you. All right. Fine.
It says over in First Chronicles, the account of First Chronicles says they did burn it.
Oh, they did burn it over in First Chronicles? Very good. Right, so they took the gods of the Philistines, and First Chronicles parallel account, it says they actually did burn them. Good, Tommy. All right. Anything else in chapter 5? Okay, move on to chapter 6. Chapter 6. What's going on here? Just one long section.
When God says how to handle things, he means it.
Yeah. David wants to bring the ark to Jerusalem. Okay. Where is the ark? Not Jerusalem. I can tell you where it's not. It's in the house of Abinadab, right? And it was put there after it had been returned by the Philistines. Okay? And the men of Beth Shemesh, had it, and they were thrilled, they were sacrificing and everything, and then they made the mistake of looking into it, and God killed what? Was it 50,000 of them? Something like that? And that's like, no, we got to get this out of here. And so it ended up staying at the house of Abinadab. Okay? And this is where they're going to retrieve it from. And so they take the ark and they put it on a new cart. Got to give them props for that. It wasn't a potentially unclean cart. It's a new cart. Was that how they're supposed to move it? Obviously not. Okay? And so it says they're going on up. And how would you describe this procession? What?
Happy.
Oh yeah, it's happy. It's an affair. It's like a parade, right? They're playing on all kinds of instruments and harps and sistrums and cymbals and pipes of fir wood and everything. And it's just, everything's going great until what happens? The ox stumbles. Okay? The ox stumbles, and that leads Uzzah to do what? Reach out and take hold of the ark. Okay? The implication there is that the ox stumbles, it looks like the ark is going to fall. Okay? Or it's unsteady. And so there's two possible reasons that Uzzah touched that ark. I can only think of two. Maybe you're smarter than I am. I'm sure many of you are. Right, Ian? And, okay. So what are the two possible reasons he touched that ark? Okay, one, just a knee-jerk reaction. Okay? How many of you have dropped a knife in the kitchen? How many of you tried to catch that knife on the way down? Okay? You're not supposed to, are you? But it's just almost an involuntary reflex. So here he is, he's walking along, Ohio's driving the car, Uzzah's walking alongside it, the ox stumbles, at the corner of his eye maybe, he sees, and he reaches up. Whoa! He touches the ark. What's the other possible reason he touched the ark?
On purpose. Keep it from falling.
What?
To keep it from falling.
Yeah, just keep it going. To do something good, right? He sees that this incredibly valuable thing to Israel, to God, is about to fall. So with every good intention, he reaches up to steady it. What's the instant result? He's dead. God strikes Uzzah there for his error. It says in verse 7 that the anger of the Lord was around against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error, and he died there by the ark of God. What was David's reaction? Oh, he gets angry, right? David becomes angry because of the Lord's outbreak against Uzzah, and he called the name of the place of Perez Uzzah to this day. And then verse 9 records another reaction, David. David was afraid of the Lord that day. And he said, how can the ark of the Lord come to me? Okay?
Do it right.
What? Do it right?
Do it right.
Yeah, do it right. Okay? So, here's this very unfortunate series of events. Right? And Numbers 4:15 tells us that nobody was to touch the ark. It says, if you touch it, you're going to die. And God stated that clearly in his law. What does this tell us about good intentions? Good intentions don't cut it, right? When it comes to serving God. Good intentions aren't going to work. Accidents aren't going to work. What happens if Uzzah reaches up to steady the ark, he touches it, and God doesn't kill him?
The trust issue.
He's not what?
And he would be fair by if he allows one person to touch it, but not others.
Okay, so it wouldn't be just, but he'd be a liar, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Because he says in the day that you touch it, you're going to die. Right? You touch it, you're going to die. And so he touches it. If he doesn't die, well then what message does that send to the rest of Israel? Yeah, you can get away with some stuff. You know, depends on the circumstance, depends on your attitude. Okay? You can get away with some stuff.
I kind of wonder how they got it on the cart to begin with.
They may very well have lifted it up by the reins. It may have had holes through it. They may have set it on there. They were supposed to carry it. The Kohathites were supposed to carry it. But they put it on the new cart. Okay? This is exactly what the Philistines did to get rid of it. They put it on a cart and just point the oxen towards Israel, and if it goes, it's of God, right? And so, this is what they're doing. Sure.
So when you talk about David saying, how can the Lord have come near me? If he were done what he was supposed to have done when he became king, then he would know that answer, because in Deuteronomy chapter 17, when it talks about appointing a king, he talks about that the king, gives the rule for the king, but in verse 18, when he is seated on his royal throne, he is to write a copy of this instruction for himself on the scroll in the presence of the Levitical priest. It is to remain with him, and he is to read from it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, to observe all the words of his instructions, and do these statutes. So, even though 500 years since Moses, to this point, if he had done what he was supposed to have done when he became king, he would have known the answer.
Yeah, that's very true. I don't even know that he would have known the answer if he hadn't actually read it all, you know, because, I mean, this is Israel's culture, right? This is how they moved it through the wilderness.
And in verse 3, it says the house was on a hill. And that, now, they built the park, right? If I were to move in, I would have a caution. You're going up and down the hill. So they were not professional movers.
Coming down the hill would make things a little bit problematic, huh?
Yeah.
Okay? So Uzzah touches it. David gets angry, but then it says he begins to fear the Lord. He was afraid. Okay? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? That's a good thing. It's a good thing. What are some of the lessons we can learn from this incident? I mean, if David knew or if he had read God's law, as Stuart is suggesting, or if he had to have read God's law, how's David's life going right now? It's like everything he touches is successful. Everything he does. He knows that the Lord has established him. He knows that the Lord is on his side, and could David have just kind of gotten a little bit lax in his relationship with God? You know, Tommy?
You know, when they lost the ark, it was gone for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
7 months with the Philistines, and then it was 20 years in the house of Abinadab.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happened to the Day of Atonement during those 20 years? They obviously were not worshiping. They were not doing the Day of Atonement. What else were they not doing?
Yeah.
David, the whole nation had lost their culture. Their tabernacle worship based on this seems to have been known.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there are people wondering what happened to the tabernacle. You know, I think it was last heard of at Gibeon, you know, somewhere. And then Solomon's day, I think it's taken actually put in the temple that Solomon built. Yeah. Now, is David possibly, he wants to come, he has built the tabernacle for Jerusalem. He wants to come to Jerusalem.
yeah, he's made a tent for it.
Right, he made a tent for it. Is David wanting to reestablish their culture? I mean, is that his motive? I want to go get it. I want to bring it back. I want to reestablish what we're supposed to be doing. I want to get back what we're supposed to be doing. How is it going to come to me now? Okay. Take a look over at Chronicles, 1 Chronicles, not Corinthians, 1 Chronicles 15. This is the account where they actually do move it into Jerusalem here. In verse 12, they're about to move the ark again. Then he said to them, "You are the heads of fathers' houses of the Levites. Sanctify yourselves, you and your brethren, that you may bring up the ark of the Lord God of Israel to the place I have prepared for it. For because you did not do it the first time, the Lord our God broke out against us, because we did not consult him about the proper order." Okay? So David realizes after the fact, we didn't look into how God wanted us to move this thing. Okay? Because you didn't do it the first time. I've got people here suggesting that Aminadab, Ahio, and Uzzah were actually Kohathites. But I'm not so sure about that, you know, based on what this is. Because you didn't do it the first time, right? This is what happened. So David learns his lesson. He said, hey, we've got to do things right. And then David, once he does start moving it the right way, what's he do after 6 steps? He sacrifices. Right? A bull or a fatted calf. Every 6 steps, all the way to Jerusalem, he does this. And he is taking no chances. And of course, it's a great celebration when he actually gets to Jerusalem. But let's look, what are some of the lessons we can learn from this incident?
God was angry towards Uzzah and struck him down, but it's a possibility part of his anger was that he had to fall through and kill him, which also tells us that that's how he feels towards us when he has to punish us for not obedience.
Yeah. I've always thought that, some of his anger, well, clearly it's righteous anger because God had told people, you don't touch this. And we fully can't grasp the holiness of God. We just can't. Okay? But then I've also thought of the possibility that God's angry because now I have to do this. Okay? But not necessarily so. Because death to God is not as big a deal as it is to us.
It's interesting that my translation uses the word that God struck down, Uzzah for his irreverence.
Okay.
And that's kind of an interesting word.
Yeah.
It doesn't lead to the idea that, well, you get the reaction.
Right.
So
But not doing what, God said don't touch it.
Right.
So even if you did it in a reaction, it's still irreverent because God said it was holy, don't touch it.
Right, that's true. But also, isn't the whole way they're going about it irreverent? Yeah, you've got the irreverence of David, you've got the irreverence of Ahio and Uzzah and everybody there involved. Because you would think somebody would know how this thing was supposed to be moved. Or they should have known. Okay? And so because they didn't, the whole situation is a situation of irreverence. Uzzah was the one who did touch the ark. Okay? So he dies as a result of that. And of course, I'm sure everybody was stunned and shocked by that. Did you ring both bells? Rude. Okay, we will we'll come back to Uzzah next week. And Diane, can you believe it? And we will finish up 7, 8, and 9 next week as well.
It's good that we can all come out for an hour of Bible study tonight. So welcome, everybody. I asked several of y'all anything to announce, and nothing really. Monty is out of town. Katie's grandbaby, Zendaya, considering how early she came into this world, Katie says she's doing okay, but she'll have to stay in the hospital till May. Andy Cantrell, we told you about him coming for a meeting, and Andy sent us a few suggestions, series that he does, and the one that we chose was serving through love, serving one another. So that'll be the topic that week, through love, serving one another. Daylight savings time, Sunday, so let's get ready for that. Anything else, folks? Okay, let's have our closing prayer. Have a good rest of the week.
Our most gracious and Father in heaven, we thank you for all the many blessings you give us. We thank you for this day and the life you've given us today. Help us to always realize that everything comes from you, even life itself. Without you, we would have nothing. Thank you for Jesus Christ and what he means to us as Christians. Help us always to imitate his word, imitate his life, and to follow your word in all that we do. Thank you for our church family and the opportunity we've had to come together tonight to study your word and learn more about you. Help each one of us to be better people for being here. Help us to strive to be better every day and to serve you and others around us in every way that we can. Be with us the rest of this week. Help us to look for others that we can tell about you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.